You're watching The Sports Objective, the podcast for Pirates. You're listening to Absolute Empowerment with Coach Jeff Connors on The Sports Objective. Join Coach C, the USA Strength and Conditioning Hall of Famer, every Monday night as he and a variety of guests, including former players, former and current coaches, pastors, and others will discuss relevant issues in coaching today's athlete, with the goal of equipping the athlete and those coaching them with the physical, mental, and spiritual armor necessary to live their best life. Here's Coach Connors.
Welcome to Absolute Empowerment. We're going to have another great show today because we've got Coach Terrell Williams up in the house, and Coach Terrell Williams is the defensive line coach for the Tennessee Titans, going into his 6th season there, and also a former Pirate who I had the privilege and honor of coaching at East Carolina University. And Coach, we're just really happy to have you in the house today.
Oh man, I'm glad to be here, man. When Coach C calls, you answer. So I'm looking forward to this one, man.
Yes, sir. So am I, because you have been so highly accomplished, and you know the purpose of this podcast. I guess you could say the underlying purpose is to honor very successful people, and then talk about faith, talk about hard work, talk about all those things that helped you to get there, and all the things that we always try to talk about when you were an athlete. And so I'm so proud of you guys and what you've accomplished. I had Dwayne Ledford on here a few weeks ago, and a lot of former Pirates and actually former Tar Heels that I coached as well. But we want to really get into your career today, and we want to really talk about some of the things that you overcame as a young man. And that's where I really want to start. I'd like for you to kind of go back to where you grew up in L.A.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about that in relationship to your experience as a young man, coming up through high school and getting involved in athletics. And I'd really love for you to talk a little bit about your family influences, your coaching influences, and what your experience was.
Absolutely. So I, again, it's an honor to be on here with you. And I grew up in, well, let me start by saying this. I was joking with some of my players in my D-line meeting room right before the season ended. And they always talk about me being from Bel Air or Beverly Hills. And I said, you guys see the finished product now. You don't see the hood dude now, but I grew up. I was born and raised in South Central LA. That's really all I knew up until I left and went to Greenville. I went to Martin Luther King Elementary School right there in South Central. I went to Fauché Junior High, and then Dorsey High School. And looking back on it, it was, when you're growing up in that kind of environment, the environment I grew up in, you don't realize just how tough it is until you actually get out and you take a step back, and you say it, you look back and you say, man, wow, these were some tough situations. But when you kind of grew up in it, it's just what you had to do to survive. And, I was very fortunate to we didn't have a lot growing up, like a lot of people didn't, but I did have a grandmother who, she'd make me go to church. She'd make me do some of the things that I didn't want to do. And, that's tough for a young kid, but she made me do it, and it helped shape me, at least until I was able to get up and get away and get to Greenville. But it was a tough environment, but it also helped structure me and kind of the ways that I am now, as far as being able to deal with adversity,
Right. Tell me a little bit about the daily life, and how did you escape gang life, for instance?
Well, I didn't escape it. I mean, I was
Okay.
in it, so it wasn't, I had cousins and close friends and a lot of relatives that were involved in it, and it's kind of one of those things that you grew up in it. Like I was mixed up in it, just like a lot of those guys were, and I didn't escape it. I was able to overcome it. I was talking to one of my buddies who I grew up with, who he did some time in prison, and
Yeah.
he's living in Texas now, and he talked to me about how proud those guys were of me, being able to get out. But it got to a point where I would say probably around the 11th grade, I had a close friend that was murdered. And at that point, I said, and a cousin that same year that was murdered. And I said, man, I don't know what I want, but I know I don't want this.
Right.
And I didn't know where I was headed, and I was able to get out of there. And one of the biggest decisions that I made was when I finished high school. A lot of people don't know this about me. Matter of fact, I was telling Coach Vrabel, our head coach here in Tennessee, he asked all the coaches to tell something to the rookies that no one knows about us. And I told him, "Hey, I didn't play high school football. I didn't never even put a pad on until I went to junior college at West LA. And
Wow.
the reason I went to West LA Junior College was not because I had some love for football at the time. It was I wasn't good enough to play basketball. So I say, you know what? I need to do something to get out of LA. And so I made the decision to go to West LA and play football. And after 2 years, I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to East Carolina, which really, in my mind, saved my life.
Right.
Being around guys like you helped save my life. I mean, there's no other way to put it.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. Let's go back and talk about your grandmother a little bit. Tell
Yeah,
me
yeah.
about her.
My grandmother, she had 10 kids, five boys and five girls, and she was tough, man. She was tough, but a Christian lady. Again, she sang in the choir and made us go to Bible study and church. I mean, it seemed like we were going to church every day during the week, and it really, again, that helped me. But one of the things that she was so kind in a sense that all the people in the neighborhood, we grew up on 38th Street in LA, and all the people in the neighborhood could come if they didn't have a place to stay. And I mean, there were times where you look up and it might be 20 people in a 3-bedroom house, small house there in LA. But that was one of the things that I felt like I picked up from her, is just having being able to be tough, because you got to be tough in that environment, but you also got to have some compassion and a kind heart, and also in that environment too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't grow up in LA, but I had a similar experience when I played ball in college. I got to be good friends with a teammate by the name of Clifford Wells, and he was from Florida, and he was a foster child, and so we would go to his house on spring break down in Orlando, Florida, and I would probably be the only white person around for miles and miles, but we stayed there at the house, and his mama, who he grew up with, Mama Sally,
Mm-hmm.
and his father, stepfather Clarence. They had about 10 or 15 foster kids in the house, and Clarence would be cooking the meals,
Mm-hmm.
and so I thought that was a really unique experience for me, to see how they took care of all those kids, and we'd sit out in the yard and just hang out a little bit and then go to the beach or whatever. But
You know what's funny, Coach? You bring that up, and I know you mentioned Dwayne Ledford,
yeah,
who I still talk to Led.
yeah,
I mean, obviously, we're both NFL coaches
right,
now, and so I still remember in '95, I came from junior college. Dwayne came from, he was coming from, I think, Marion High School
correct, yep,
there in North Carolina. And it's funny because I still tell this story to my players. That's one of the first things I tell them is I was coming from South Central LA where K through 12, I'd never been to school with a white person before. All right.
yeah,
And then Dwayne was coming from Marion, North Carolina, where he hadn't been around many black folks
yeah,
before. And it was amazing, and we still talk about it today. We still talk. I mean, we're still pretty close. But what's amazing is how much we had in common. All right, and you're talking about a kid from South Central LA, comes from what people would consider to be a broken home, and then Dwayne came from a two-parent home and from the mountains up in North Carolina. But once we started to talk and we were around each other, we realized how much we had in common. And I tell my players this all the time, man, until you sit down and have a conversation with someone, you have no idea how this person could impact you, or what this person, he may look a certain way. And but when you start to talk to people, then you can sort through who's a good person and who's a bad person. So
right,
that was one of my great experiences about coming to Greenville, man, is it was so different. Again, I'm from South Central, and I think we had some teammates. Brian Johnson was from DC. Rod Coleman was
yeah.
from Philly. So there were some other inner city kids there, but I mean, we got along with everybody there. It was just a good environment for me. Like I needed that. I needed Greenville, North Carolina.
Well, I can't even tell you how excited I get when I think about that whole experience back then with you guys, because it was such a special group of people, and how much I treasure that. I can't even express to you. And that's one of the reasons that I've had this podcast, because I want people to know about, you guys,
Right.
because, I'd like people to talk more about Rod Coleman, around Greenville,
Mm-hmm.
and Terrell Williams and Dwayne Ledford, and so many people that have been highly successful out of that whole era, I guess you could say.
Yeah, yeah. I tell you what, man, we had a good crew. And what's amazing is between Rod and Norris, Forrest Foster, all the guys that play, Kevin Monroe, Jeff Carr, like we had some really good players. But what's amazing to me now is a lot of guys are coaching. Like Peacock, I think, is a head coach at Venice High School, very successful high school in Venice, Florida. So there's a lot of guys that are coaching. But the I don't think people, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on here with you. I don't think people really understand the importance of a strength coach. All right. Because I think when people talk about, especially in college football, like it's different in pro football because, I mean, our guys left at the end of the season, and some of them don't show back up until June, and then they're here. So it's a lot different. But in college football, man, we were around you more than we were around any other coach on staff, and just the impact that you had um on us was invaluable. And I'm speaking for me, and I know I speak for the other guys when I talk about that. Is it was we needed a guy like you to push us, and then to put your arm around us when you need to. And I coach my players the same way, and I raised my son the same way, who's an 11-year-old. I was just on before we got on. I know we were talking. He's a heck of a little hockey player right now. So again, I talk about that. I tell my buddies back home, yeah, I got a son playing hockey. They're like, hockey? Like, where'd you know? I was like, heck, I didn't know anything about hockey. He wants to play. So it's his journey, not mine.
Hear that? I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, so I did some ice skating, but I didn't play hockey. But when I think about how hard it was even to ice skate backwards and so forth, and you see what they do on the ice, it's just incredible. Just to ice skate and not fall down, with somebody smacking you in the chest.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous sport.
Yeah. It's a different world, man.
No doubt. Yeah, but, going back to what we're talking about, I'm going to probably say that 60-70% of the guys I coached over, 30 some years probably came from a single parent home. And I'm not talking about African Americans solely. I'm talking about white guys, Hispanic people. I mean, there were a lot of people who came from single parent homes. And, it always was interesting to me because I met so many strong grandmothers
Yes.
over the years that would come on recruiting trips. And you could tell that they were such a strong force. And I thought that was an interesting phenomenon. Of course, I had a couple strong grandmas myself, but just the way that a grandmother would kind of take the reins and successfully raise children, is definitely something to think about.
Yeah, and when you talk about that, man, I just to tell you a little bit about my family, I didn't have a dad, and my mom had me when she was 16, and it was a struggle for her. My mom passed away during COVID, and it was a struggle for her. I mean, it was really tough, and now as a parent, I can understand that and respect that. Like I'm getting older now. I'm 48, but I couldn't even imagine having a kid at 16, but my mom did the best she could, and eventually my grandmother did a lot as well, as I mentioned before. But in life, you have so many examples of what to do and what not to do. And one of the big things for me was, more than anything, I wanted to be a father. Like, I wanted to be a father more than a football coach, more than a teammate, or I just wanted to be a father, and I wanted to be a good father, because I just felt like I wanted to be able to give a kid something that I didn't have. Well, in 19 or not 19, I'm sorry, but in 2012, that was my first NFL job. I went to the Oakland Raiders, coming from Texas A&M, and I had my wife is Dr. Tiffany Williams. She has a PhD from Purdue.
Wow.
I definitely outkicked my coverage there, but my wife is is Dr. Tiffany Williams. And in 2012, I thought, man, this was it. Like, I've arrived, man. I'm coaching for the Oakland Raiders. I grew up in LA, so I kind of grew up like a Raiders fan. And I had two boys, my son Tyson, who was 3 years old, and my son Taj, who was born that year. And I say, you know what? I got two boys. I got a beautiful wife. I'm coaching defensive line in the NFL. Man, I got everything that I want. And in about I guess it was right after Halloween. That week we were getting ready to play. It was November 2nd. We were getting ready to play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home in Oakland. and it happened to be my son Tyson's 4th birthday. And I remember getting up that morning, going into his room. NFL is a lot different than college because a Saturday is really laid back. So I went in and tell him looking forward to his party. He just turned 4, and I went into his room and I could tell something was wrong, like he didn't look good. Okay. And I told my wife, and she said, "Yeah, I'm gonna run him to the to the to the doctor, like the local doctor. No big deal. Just take him and see, let him check his temperature, because this was the day of his party." Well, by the time I got off the practice field at 11, I had a message from my wife. We're in Oakland Children's Hospital with Tyson, and we don't know what's wrong. Well, by the time I get over there, the doctors tell us, well, he's got a 50-50 chance of living. And you can imagine as a parent that it's like, okay, wait a minute. He was completely healthy. Now you're telling me he's got a 50-50 chance of living. And this again, all I wanted to do was be a father. This was my firstborn. Everything was perfect. And we went later that day. I coached in the game the next day, all right, because the doctor said he was getting better. So I said, okay, I'm gonna step away. I'm gonna go coach in this football game. This was on a Sunday, and he stayed in the hospital that whole week and ended up passing away November 9th. So he went in on November 2nd and then passed away November 9th. And we still don't know exactly what caused him to get sick. And that was a very tough experience, because when he passed away, my wife went home to change. I obviously didn't make the trip with the team to Baltimore, but she went home to go change, and I'm sitting there. The doctor just told me, hey, his white blood cell count's getting better, everything's looking good.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he flatlined right there in front of me while I'm sitting at the bed, and they weren't able to bring him back. And obviously that was a crushing moment for me, just because, again, that's all I wanted, was to be a dad and protect my family and do all the things that do everything right, which I felt like I was doing everything right. But then I still remember to this day, one of my players, Tommy Kelly, he's a big defensive lineman from Mississippi State. And he said, listen, man, I know it's hard, but you just have to believe that God doesn't make mistakes, and at the time you hear that and it's like, well, I don't want to hear that. I mean, I just lost my son who meant and means the world to me. But then it tested my faith. It really did. Like, it tested my faith. It tested everything I believe. And I've had a lot of people die in my life. I've had a lot of people die in my life, whether it's through violence or natural causes, but to lose your child there in front of you was a difficult thing. And it's something that we still deal with today. But I always share that story, especially with my players, because I always tell them, man, when you have someone that you love, then you better make sure that you tell them that you love them and that you care about them. All right. Because you just don't know. All right. The other thing is, when sometimes guys have kids, and whether they have a girlfriend or a wife, sometimes those things don't always work, but it's important that you're there for your kids. Like, that's the most important thing. So that was a tough experience for me, and I wanted to share that to everyone who's listening. Is again, if you have people that you love, life is short, man. Make sure you tell them that you love them, and you can have the best care. We had the best doctors in the Bay Area, and they did a phenomenal job, but they just weren't able to stop him from passing away. And it's unfortunate. And my wife and myself and my son, who he'll be 11 next month, he was a baby at the time, and he doesn't have a chance to get to know his big brother. So that's part of life, though.
Well, Terrell, I was vaguely aware of that situation, and became aware of it. Did not really know the facts. I can't even imagine that. I very much appreciate you sharing that story for our listeners, because faith is so important to my mission with this podcast. So
Yes.
thank you very much. I love you. And,
Love you too, brother.
I'm trying to pull myself together right now. So I will continue to pray for you and your family, and I'm happy that somehow you get through that and you continue on.
Yeah. And one of the things that helped me was being in the NFL when this happened. People started reaching out, people I didn't even know, and they were sharing their stories about them losing a child. Because I think that when you lose a child, you can only someone that has experienced that can feel that pain. And I would always hear people say, well, I felt the hole in my heart, and I just couldn't understand, like, what does that mean? Like, well, I don't understand what that means. Well,
Yeah.
losing my son, I felt that. But I also feel like it's helped me in some ways. I've been able to be a blessing to some people that have gone through some of the same things that I've gone through,
Yeah.
like losing a child. And man, and that's what life really is about, man. It's about sharing your scars, and hope that you can impact someone else, because you never know what your story, how your story might help someone else. So that's
Right.
why I think it's important to talk about. And it when it first happened, I just couldn't talk about it. I just couldn't. Like, it would jar me. But now, not that it's easier, it's every day I wake up, you got to make a decision on how you're going to approach the day. And that's still there, but I'm able to talk about it because I think it's important to share.
Well, I'm just really thankful that we were able to talk about that part of your story as well.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So thank you.
Yes.
And I wanted to go back to with, I don't know, sometimes I watch the news or whatever, and I just hear all this stuff today about racism and everything. I mean, I just go back to that whole decade, kind of when we were together there, before I actually left and went to Carolina. And man, we never really even thought about, or I mean, I can't even remember anything along those lines. Like, it was the best time because we all cared about each other so much. I don't think anybody I can't even remember any kind of incident where
Yeah.
anybody said there was some kind of racism. I mean, like that whole thing with athletics, with football, and particularly during that time.
Yeah.
I just and I've seen some some incidences or examples of maybe racism in athletics or whatever, but it was such a special time in that respect as well, because we were all so close to each other. And
Yeah. And I
we
think the thing about athletics is it's amazing, man, because what you bring so many people from different backgrounds, different environments, different experiences, and they're able to come together as a team. And I think society can learn something
No doubt.
from athletics and how we're able to do it. I can even go back even further where when I played sports, played basketball in high school, and I know it was the same way on the football team, where if you're from LA, you know Bloods and Crips, where that stuff originated. The gang, True Bloods and Crips, originated in LA. Well, you had people playing sports together that were just mortal enemies. Like the gangs were, these guys are just, man, shoot each other, shoot at each other, but then they would play on these
Yeah.
teams together. And that's not a racial thing. That's a gang thing. But like you said, again, I told the story about Dwayne Ledford. I mean, again, mountains in North Carolina, didn't go to school with any black kids. I'm from South Central LA, didn't go to school with any white kids. But what happened was we were brought together on this team and we talked. Like we were able to talk and just
Right.
share experiences. And we didn't agree with everything. I didn't agree with some of the things he thought. He didn't agree with some of the things I thought. Black had nothing to do with black and white. We just didn't agree. Well, it was no different than um, some of the people I grew up with in South Central. Like you just don't agree with on everything. But I believe that if you treat people right, man, and people always say, well, what's right and wrong? Like if you got to ask that question, then I think you need to check yourself on
Yeah.
what's right and what's wrong. But I think when we have dialogue, you're able to realize that, hey, man, we got something in common, and that doesn't mean that you always have to agree, and there's going to be arguments and different things. But I agree with you, man. I believe society can learn something from sports, and yes, racism exists. All right, it does. Like I'm not sitting here, and just like you're not sitting here and saying that it doesn't.
Right.
But I think that when you sit back and people can really talk and have some dialogue, you realize that we're all fighting the same fight, man. We're all fighting the same struggle. It's more, in my mind, things are more about a socio-economic
Right.
uh, deal than it is racism a lot of times.
Uh-huh.
The
Yeah.
haves and the have-nots.
Right. No doubt. Well, my whole thing was I had this affinity for, rhythm and dance all my life, so I always enjoyed the different types of music. And, I'm still determined I'm going to learn how to crip walk, man. So, I get somebody to teach me that.
Oh man, I would, but I might twist my ankle these days. I don't know about that. I don't know if you can rehab me back there, man.
Gotcha. Let's.
Oh
I want to talk about your career. I just want to say a few things. When I coached you, the characteristics that you had. Team player. That's how I always saw you. Always a great attitude and work ethic, and always a smile on your face, man. You were a happy guy. If you weren't happy, I didn't see it. And always well liked by your teammates. Very humble, low key. If you got a sack, you didn't do a dance or anything, man. You just went back to the huddle. But you're a really good player, and of course, back in that time, definitely one of my favorites on the team. And I just really always enjoyed your personality. But you had transferred to ECU.
yeah.
And you graduated from ECU in 98, I believe. Is that correct?
90. I graduated the spring of my last year playing was 96. And then I
Okay.
was a student. I didn't redshirt, so I was a student coach the season of the 97 season. So I did graduate in the spring of 98. And then when I left there, my first coaching job, I didn't even have a dang car. I just jumped on the Greyhound bus and rode to Fort Scott, Kansas, man.
Right.
That was my first job. Kevin Gundy gave me my first job at Fort Scott, Kansas, coaching the defensive line there.
Right.
And it was there for 1 year. I left Fort Scott. Then I went to North Carolina A&T and worked for the legendary Bill Hayes
Yeah.
at North Carolina A&T. I spent 3 years there at A&T, and then I went to Youngstown State and worked at Youngstown. Lived in Youngstown, Ohio. Coached there for 2 years for John Haycock. Spent 2 years there, and then Coach Fleming, who was our secondary coach when I played at East Carolina, he went to Akron as the defensive coordinator, and then hired me as the defensive line coach. JD Brookhart hired me as the defensive line coach at Akron. Spent 2 years there, won a MAC championship. Still the only team to I believe that's still the only championship in school history of any sort, and that was a big deal. And after the championship game, I left and went and coached at Purdue for Joe Tiller, who was another coach. Joe's passed away now for some years now, but you want to talk about someone who had an impact in my career. Joe Tiller was a big part of that. I spent 5 years there with Joe, and then left Purdue 5 years and coached at Texas A&M and spent 2 years at Texas A&M, and then I got into the NFL in 2012 with the Raiders. 3 years with the Raiders, 3 years with the Dolphins, and then going, like you said, going on year 6. Man, these years go by fast.
Yeah.
But I'm going on year 6 here in Tennessee. Mike Vrabel hired me here in Tennessee, and it's been a wonderful experience. But I say all the journey, like I've been to all these places, all these journeys, but the foundation is a lot of what we did in Greenville. I'm just telling you, the way I coach and the way I, how I treat my players is a lot. It's a lot like how you treated us. You were very fair and very tough and demanding. And I knew one thing I knew about Jeff Connors. He was going to be tough, all right. But I also knew that if I had an issue, I can come and close the door, and I knew that you were going to be there and help me in any way that you can. So I'm the same way, man. I love my players now. When you put on my tombstone, I want that somewhere, is this guy loved his players, and that's so important to me, because I feel like in today's world, with how these kids are growing up, and a lot of the same things like you talked about with us, single parent, and but they have social media and all these different things. I just feel like you have to be able to, one, gain their trust, because in the NFL, these are men. Like they got to be able to trust you, and you got to be able to trust them. And then that's how you're able to coach them. You got to have a relationship with them, which not everybody in this league believes in that, but I certainly believe in relationships. Like I can't fake it. I can't do something or coach you if I don't have a relationship with you. It's important to me.
Gotcha. Well, you also had some during the. I think it's important to mention too. What helped you, I think, is while you were coaching at the collegiate level, that you got involved in internships with the NFL and
Yes.
made sure that you were diligent about that to make some contacts. And then, of course, Coach Fleming was always my buddy. He came and coached with us at Carolina for a while as well.
Yeah.
And actually, when I retired, he offered me the job at Rhode Island, but just a little bit too far from
Yeah.
Greenville.
I don't know. I don't know if Flem can pay old Coach C enough to come up to Rhode Island, man.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you retired, you got some money from other. Yeah, now you got your retirement, and of course, a couple months ago, I went ahead and started collecting my Social Security too. So you're getting up there when you start collecting that. But I hated it because I always had so much fun with Fleming. It was always such a great time. With him and Pagano. And
Yeah.
of course, I had Pagano on a podcast, and of course, I had Dwayne Ledford on a podcast. If you hadn't listened to it yet, that was a really great one.
Yeah, I'm gonna check them all out, man. I'm gonna check them all out. Flem's my guy, man. I wouldn't be. He's another one that I wouldn't be here without him.
Yeah, no doubt. We really had some good times, and had some good times celebrating some victories too. That was always great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Flem always liked that chant, "The roof is on fire." So that was his deal.
Yeah, he was still saying it in Akron too. So
yeah,
I'm sure they hear that up at Rhode Island too, man.
Yeah, I'm not sure if all that's acceptable right now, but hey,
Yeah. Well, when the doors are closed, anything's acceptable,
that's
right?
Right. So the other thing I want to talk about was, you coached some Pro Bowlers, man.
Yeah.
Dominican Sue and Cameron Wake.
Yeah.
And then where you're at now, you had, I think, Jeff Simmons.
Yeah, he's going to his second Pro Bowl this year.
Okay. And maybe I'm thinking of Terrell Casey.
Case. Yep. Been fortunate to coach some really good players, and it's funny, man, because they're not great just because they're talented. That's the thing that I've learned in my years in this league and my years in coaching college ball and playing college ball. But great players are usually the hardest workers. Like you mentioned, Dominic and Sue. Yeah. I haven't been around anybody that works as hard as him, but Jeff Simmons is the same way. Jarrell Casey's the same way. When I was in Oakland, I had the privilege of being around Charles Woodson for, I think we were together for 2 years, and Wood was on his way. And people if you don't know Charles Woodson, well, Charles Woodson won the Heisman as a defensive player at Michigan. And he won a national championship at Michigan, and he won a Super Bowl, and he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Well, Wood came back to us from Green Bay. He was at the end of his career, and I still remember in between periods before the offense or before the defense would go, you look over on the other field, and he's running sprints. I mean, he is sprinting. This is before he's about to go out and the defense is up and he's going against the scout team. And so we sat next to each other in the team meetings, and I said, Wood, man, why are you running? You're 38, I think, or however old he was at the time. Like, why are you running these sprints, man? He was like, man, I want to make myself dog tired during practice because I want to try to simulate the games. And so then when he's running these sprints, you see some of these younger players that are kind of too cool for school on the sideline not doing that. And I bring that up because, again, this guy was a Hall of Famer. He is a Hall of Famer in college football and pro football, but he was also one of the hardest workers that I've ever been around. And sometimes you can be talented, but if you don't work hard, you'll never reach your full potential. I don't care how talented you are.
Right.
So that's been one of the great things, is just being around and having conversations with some of these great players, not just at my position, but and other positions on the team. The thing that's common, whether you're a punter, a nose tackle, or a quarterback, is work ethic. And I mean, that. Hell, we learned that from you. Like, you can't think about how many games we won back then against teams that, I mean, I can say it, that were more talented than us, because we outworked them. We won a lot of games in the fourth quarter, and we're kind of that way here in Tennessee.
My first year at Carolina, I had Julius Peppers, and he was playing basketball. So the basketball coach said, "Don't even think about touching him till basketball's over." Okay, so, but I couldn't wait to get my hands on him and just see what he was about. And another guy who was an extremely hard worker, and basically would be picking a defensive back or running back, whoever, at the end of a session to race in the 40. And he did that a lot. And,
yeah. But again, most fans think, well, these guys are just talented. Yeah, they are, but there's a bunch of work that goes in, and there's also a bunch of people that that help them along the way. Whether it's a strength coach, a position coach, a trainer, or an equipment manager. There's so many people that touch these guys' lives. A custodian. I mean, I've had some of the best conversations about life with some of the people who clean the building and our places and empty the trash cans.
Sure.
It's just amazing. Again, we talked about it. When you sit down and talk to people, you never know what you might have in common, or what they might, or how they may touch your life. So we work in a great profession, man, where we're around people and get to touch and spend time with different people.
Well, with Peppers, what was interesting to me is on pro day when Tim Crumry came in. Do you remember Tim?
Oh, yeah. He would grab him by the head and he was a wrestler. He would wrestle him, man.
Yeah, Crumry had his boots and jeans on.
Yeah.
He kept punching Julius in the chest and making him get his hands off of him, and then grab him around the head, slap him in the head, whatever. But Crumry was actually bleeding. This went on I think it went on for 3 minutes straight. And he was trying to get Julius to quit.
Yeah.
And I still got that on video. So every once in a while I watch that because it's so entertaining. But Julius wasn't going to quit. And that was an interesting little competition at that point. But it was kind of very interesting what some of these people would do with these guys when they came in on pro day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that those days are gone now, where even when I came in, some of the things that I would do on pro day, you because you can't really find out. I mean, when you go work a defensive lineman out on pro day, it's different than working a receiver where you can throw and catch and do all of those things. I mean, what are you going to do with a D lineman? Like, you want to see if they're going to quit, and so you set drills up to test them, see if they can react when they're tired, or how they react when they're tired. And well, these days it's a lot different. I don't even know what what you can and can't do these days are a lot different than when you were still at it. It's way different now.
Well, going back to the Titans, Steve Watterson was one of my mentors and one of my good friends, and I visited Titans probably about 3 or 4 times when he was there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I coached Arthur Smith through his career at Carolina.
Art, yeah.
He was always an interesting character. And I met his dad a few times, who was really a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I went down to see Atlanta play the Steelers and stayed at Led's house.
Okay.
And that was we had a great time.
Yeah, you went and stayed at Led's mansion, huh?
Yeah, the $2 million mansion there. He said, yeah, coach, I live in the former head coach's house. I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's check it out. So
yeah, he tells everybody that, man. He told me when he was buying the house, hey, I'm buying I think it's Mike Smith, or I can't remember the coach's name, but yeah, he bought his house. And so Led's an interesting character, man. Great human being, or a great pirate.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I stayed in the guest house. It was wonderful. So but those guys, they struggle a little bit, but I guess they got a lot more money available this coming year to go out and get some defensive players. I guess that's what they need to do. And
yeah,
I'm looking forward to them being very successful next year. And I hope that works out for everybody. Of course, I think that I'll probably end up going down there, or if they play the Steelers, because I'm from Pittsburgh, I might go ahead and try to check that out in Pittsburgh next year. But
yeah, well, hell, you can come on to Nashville. I think we play them here next year in Nashville. So
okay,
we may go to it. I don't know. I know we play the Falcons next year. I'm just not sure whether it's in Nashville or Atlanta. But you're more than welcome to come through here. I got a place for you to stay. I don't have a guest house, but but you're more than welcome to come on here anytime.
I'm going to be at the Holston House. I'm going to be in a wedding out there May 19th to 23rd, so I might give you a holler. I'll be around Nashville.
Okay, yeah, we'll be here. I think usually around that time we're in OTA, so
Gotcha.
we'll be here. You come and yell, and I put you in a room and let you get fired up and maybe rip off a shirt or something and see if you scare some of these D linemen now.
I coached Chase Rice at Carolina. Of course, he's a famous country singer out there now, and so I see him every once in a while. I've been to a couple of his shows. He brought me out on stage one time, which was crazy. But
okay, what's funny, man, is we went out to dinner, me and my family last night, and we were riding back in the Uber, and the Uber's playing country music, and I think there was a song with Chris Stapleton and Justin Timberlake. And I told my wife, I said, you know what, I kind of like country music. I actually like it a little bit more than what I thought. My son plays hockey with Knox Bentley. Dirks Bentley is his dad, and then he played basketball with Eric Church's kid also. So that's the thing about Nashville is and when I met those guys, I had no idea who they were. Well, you probably don't know who the heck I am. I don't know who the heck you are. So
yeah, when we played the Music City Bowl, we went out there Christmas morning downtown and ended up sitting right beside. There was hardly any people in this bar.
Mm-hmm.
And Kelly Pickler was in there. Of course, she's famous. And I said, "Hey, that's Kelly Pickler." And then we got to talking. I got my picture with her and all that. And she got up and sang, "You ain't woman enough to take my man and stand by your man." I said, "Go ahead, girl." So that was pretty cool. So we hung out with her that morning. Went to a couple other places with her. So that was really cool.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah. But, I love Steve Watterson. What a great person. And, of course, Jeff Fisher made him the assistant head coach when he was a strength coach.
I did not know
Yeah,
that. How
that's
about
a
that?
title he had under Jeff Fisher. So I mean, that says a lot for Steve, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I met Coach Watterson when we first came in. He was retiring. So
Yeah,
I had a
yeah,
chance to meet him, and I mean, obviously you hear a lot about guys like him and yourself. I mean, don't people know who you are? It's funny. I was telling one of the coaches on our staff. I said, hey, he said, "What you got going on today?" I said, "Well, I got to do a podcast." And he said, "Who are you doing it with?" And I said, "Jeff Connors." He was like, "Oh yeah, the legendary strength coach, huh?"
okay.
I said, "Okay, yeah, that's my guy, man. I didn't know he was legendary, but yeah, that's my guy, man." No, but people, trust me, people know who you are and they know your impact and that. So that's a big deal, man.
Man, I appreciate that, and I tell you what, I wouldn't want to do the 12-hour day job anymore. But what does kind of appeal to me still? I don't know if I'd ever have an opportunity, but that player development stuff. It's intriguing to me, and I know most of those guys are former players, but that's kind of what I'm doing now. Is I'm trying to direct people to a spiritual life, direct
Mm,
them to good decisions, and I really love that kind of stuff. It's something I did a little bit of when I was coaching when I had time, but at the same time, I think those positions have great value in keeping people on track and really helping them just as people, So those things are very intriguing to me.
yeah, and they're very very important jobs
Yeah,
because that they're full-time jobs. Like that's
yeah,
what those guys do all the time. Whereas coaches, man, we gotta, you're coaching a guy how to
yeah,
squat correctly or do all these things. I'm as a D-line coach, I'm coaching them to get their hands inside and pad level and all these things. But
yeah,
along with the player development, because we do that as coaches, but like you said, now most organizations, whether it's college or pro, they have player development
yeah.
people, and I that's a job to me. Like if I was a head coach, that would be one of my first and most important hires, because again, those guys can spend more time around the players, and they have to develop relationships
Right.
with them as well.
Yeah.
No, I can see you'd be perfect in that type of role.
Well, uh, I think that I could really enjoy that. That's kind of what I'm trying to do through the podcast. Influence as many people as I can through the podcast, and very specifically, we are trying to bring people to Christ. I mean, we're not going to pull any punches there. That's what we're trying to do. That's why I have pastors on here like Pernell Griffin and Leonard Henry and those guys. Brian
Hmm.
Moss did a great job of Christmas presentation, and so so I'm going to go that route with the podcast, and if some other opportunity comes along those lines, I'll definitely consider it. But we'll roll with this for now. But I'm going to have to bring this to a close, I guess, in a few minutes here. But what I'd like you to talk about before we close is, just tell me about your vision. Are you really happy and enjoy the D-line part of it? Do you want to be a coordinator? What is your vision for the future for Terrell Williams?
My vision is, and I've had opportunities to be coordinators. I turned down a Big Ten coordinator job when I went to Texas A&M. And I've had some NFL opportunities. I've had some head coaching opportunities in some smaller schools, and
Right.
I love coaching defensive line, man. I
Yeah.
love being around the guys. I love spending time with them. I love getting to know their families. I love being a shoulder for them when they need to cry or vent or whatever it is. And I just feel like if I'm a head coach or if I'm a coordinator, now my focus is more on the entire team, where I love my job. I love
Yeah.
doing what I do, and I have a passion for it. Like, I can't see myself coaching quarterbacks or defensive backs, or I'm a D-line coach, and that's what I love doing. So,
Yeah.
and you never know what the future holds. Again,
Right.
I mean, it's all in God's hands. I mean, whatever way he leads me, that's where I'll be. But right now, my vision and my passion more than anything, because sometimes we have visions, but your vision without the passion don't work. My passion is defensive line. Like, that's what I love, man. I'm
Right.
everything about it, the lifestyle, and that's what I tell my players. This is a lifestyle. Playing defensive line, coaching defensive line, it's a lifestyle. It's different than everything else.
Well, that's a huge point and a very important point, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's hard to be successful with anything without passion, brother.
No question. And
Yeah.
and again, I learned that from you, man. You were passionate about what you did, and sometimes it probably didn't come off how some people want it, but
Yeah.
you got your point across. I'm living proof, just like a lot of them other guys that you've had on here.
Well, I totally enjoyed every minute of it, and I love to challenge you guys, but at the same time, the things that you all did, and I've said this several times on podcasts, but just the way that you guys conditioned in the summer and the way that you came together as a team and supported each other and made each other feel important to each other. Yeah, that's something that that I noticed about you all. Uh, I really didn't care that much, about people liking me and all that kind of stuff. I wanted you guys to feel important to each other, and you guys did a great job with that. And that's why when you got out there on the field on game day, it mattered so much to you guys as a team. And I think that's great for any team to learn, is the importance of being important to each other. And it's tough these days because now you get the portal, and of course you got free agency, and of course it's a very tough in the NFL. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that you really enjoy being a D-line coach, because you can invest and get consistency over time with people and get them to trust you and want to play for you. And I think that's really a point that I see that I really feel like where you've been successful.
Yeah, and again, it's relationships,
Yeah.
and you can't build relationships without sitting down and getting to know people. And I believe that that's a strength of mine. I believe that
Yeah.
that's what separates me from a lot of other guys doing the same job. Is I know how to build relationships. I know how to connect with people, and I know how to coach technique and do all of those things. That's important. You can't do this job if you don't, but relationships matter, man.
Yeah.
I know that, and you know that they matter.
Now did you have Cliff Yoshida?
I had Yo, yeah, I
Yeah.
had Yo,
Well,
yeah.
I want to mention Yo because Yo was great for building relationships, and
Yeah, he
I
recruited
don't know
me.
where he is now.
He's living in South Carolina. I still
Okay.
talk to him every time we play the Carolina Panthers. He comes and sees me. He was living in Shreveport, or where he was coaching at Grambling, so he was living in Louisiana.
Yeah.
He came down to see me when I was coaching at Texas A&M, and again, it's relationships. Yo is the one who talked me into coaching. I still remember him saying, "I think you'd be a good coach," and I'm like, "I don't know about that. I don't know if that's what I want to do." And now I'm full-fledged into it now. So it's yes, you're 100%. Cliff Yoshida
Oh yeah.
was a big part of a lot of our success.
Coach Bruce said Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
I always tell you about that.
Oh yeah. Yes, he did.
Yeah. Well, hey man, we could make this a 2-hour deal. There's no question about it. I can think of 100 other questions and topics I'd love to talk to you about, but if you would shoot me your cell, and maybe I can just message me your cell and Yo's too, if you would.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you a holler when we get out there in a few months, and see if we can get together. But I really appreciate you coming on, and so many more people in the Pirate Nation need to know about you and know who you are and what you've done. So
I appreciate you too, Coach, and love you, man. And it wouldn't be where I am without you and your support. And there's so many things that I'm thankful and grateful for. And my relationship with you is one of them. And I love East Carolina. Trust me, I wouldn't be where I am without that university. But it's not the university that matters. It's the people at the university that matters, because when you have problems, you can't talk to the weight room. You can talk to the strength coach if you need to. So I'm thankful and grateful for you, man. Trust me.
Well, I appreciate it, brother. This is Jeff Connors from Absolute Empowerment. God bless, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to Absolute Empowerment with Coach Jeff Connors on The Sports Objective. Join us every Monday night for a new edition of the show. Listen to the show pretty much everywhere podcasts are found. Be sure to follow us on social media at The Sports OBJ on Twitter and TikTok, at The Sports Objective on Instagram. Like and follow our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. As always, we appreciate you listening to the show. And go Pirates!